What happens when a broken human, a hunted alien warrior, and a glowing baby are forced to trust each other or die alone? Stay tuned for a story of survival, hope, and impossible bonds across the stars. The wind howled like a wounded animal outside my window that night, rattling the loose panes of glass in their frames. Another miserable winter evening in what used to be New Detroit, now just another crumbling outpost on the edge of the regulated zones. I stirred the pot of reheated stew, watching the thin liquid bubble weekly. 5 years since I'd hung up my paramedic badge. 5 years since I'd stopped trying to save a world that didn't want saving. Now I just survived day by day in this abandoned apartment block where nobody asked questions and nobody cared. The power flickered again, casting my shadow against the peeling wallpaper. In those moments of darkness, I could almost see the faces of those I couldn't save. The refugees from the Valari homeworld, the children with radiation burns, my sister Sarah bleeding out as I held pressure on wounds too severe for my field training. The lights sputtered back, and I poured the stew into a chipped bowl. Another night of silence. Another night alone. That's when I heard it. 3 sharp, urgent knocks at my door. Nobody knocked on doors in this part of the city. Not unless they wanted something, usually something that would get you killed. I set down my bowl and reached for the old service pistol I kept under the counter. The knocking came again, more desperate this time. Against everything I knew about survival, I moved toward the door. Maybe it was the paramedic in me that never quite died. Maybe it was just curiosity. Maybe I was just tired of the silence. I looked through the peephole and froze. Standing there, illuminated by the flickering hallway light, was a tall, gaunt figure. Not human. The elongated face, the distinct ridge along the forehead, the golden eyes that seemed to glow in the dimness. Valari. A refugee, one of the aliens whose world had been destroyed in the war. And in her arms, wrapped in what looked like scraps of thermal blanket, was a small infant. Blue-skinned and emitting a faint pulsing glow. I should have backed away. I should have pretended I wasn't home. Harboring unregistered aliens was a one-way ticket to the labor colonies. But as I watched, the infant made a small movement, reaching one tiny hand up toward its mother's face. And the mother, she swayed slightly as if about to collapse. I opened the door. The blast of icy air hit me first, carrying swirling snow into my entryway. The Valari woman's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with suspicion. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "My child will die in this cold." In that moment, I saw Sarah again, bleeding out as officials argued about whether refugees deserved emergency care. I saw myself walking away from the field hospital for the last time, promising I'd never to get involved again. The baby made a soft chirping sound. I stepped back and gestured them inside. As the door closed behind them, reality crashed over me like a bucket of ice water. What the hell was I doing? The Enforcement Division had been cracking down harder than ever on alien sympathizers. Just last week, they'd raided an apartment 3 blocks over, dragging out a family who'd been sheltering a Centaurian couple. The Valari woman stood just inside my doorway, her tall frame hunched protectively around her child. Up close, I could see how badly malnourished she was. The characteristic silvery sheen of healthy Valari skin was dull and patchy. Dark circles ringed her golden eyes. Her clothes, once probably a flight suit of some kind, were torn and dirty. "I am Sarah," she said, her eyes darting around my apartment, cataloging exits, threats, possibilities. "This is Neri." I should have told her she couldn't stay. I should have given her some supplies and sent her back into the night. That would have been the smart play, the safe play. Instead, I found myself reaching out toward the bundle in her arms. "Let me see," I said, my voice gentler than it had been in years. "I was a paramedic before." Sarah hesitated, clutching the child tighter. "A doctor," I clarified, tapping my chest. "I help sick people. Used to anyway." Something in her posture shifted, not relaxing exactly, but a deliberation happening behind those alien eyes. Slowly, she unwrapped part of the bundle, revealing the infant's face. My breath caught. Valari children were rare enough that most humans had never seen one. The baby's features were delicate, almost luminescent. Unlike human babies, its eyes were open, large golden orbs that seemed to take in everything. But what struck me most was the blue tinge to its lips and the shallow rise and fall of its tiny chest. "Hypothermia," I muttered, then looked up at Sarah. How long have you been out in that storm? 3 days, she answered, her voice cracking. The transport was supposed to meet us at the old refinery, but they never came. We've been hiding, moving at night. I felt a surge of anger at the smugglers who'd abandoned them, at the system that made this woman and her child fugitives, at myself for not walking away when I should have. Your baby needs warmth fluids and rest, I said, moving to the small kitchen area. I grabbed the pot of stew and thrust it toward her. Eat this, all of it. Sierra's eyes widened at the offered food, but she made no move to take it. Why would you help us? She asked, suspicion evident in her voice. What do you want in return? It was a fair question. No one did anything for free anymore, especially not for aliens. I thought about it genuinely. What did I want to be left alone? To forget? To stop seeing Sarah's face in my dreams? Nothing, I finally said. Just eat before it gets cold. After a moment's hesitation, Sarah balanced her child in one arm and took the pot with the other. She ate, standing up quickly but carefully, never taking her eyes off me. I moved to my sleeping alcove and pulled the thin blankets from my bed. Not much, but better than nothing. I arranged them in a makeshift nest on the small couch. For the baby, I explained, gesturing. It'll help warm them up. Sarah finished the stew and set the pot down. With careful, deliberate movements, she'd approached the couch and laid Neri in the blanket nest. The infant made a soft trilling sound, tiny hands reaching up. Thank you, Sarah said, but remained standing tense and ready to grab her child and run at the first sign of trouble. I understood. I'd be suspicious too. You can call me Evan, I said, keeping my distance. Evan Reyes. Outside, the wind howled louder, rattling the windows. In here, a strange, fragile moment of trust hung between us, a human and a Valari, both survivors of the same broken world. Sometimes it takes just one act of kindness to change everything. If you believe that too, stay with us to see what happens next. Night settled around us like a heavy blanket. The storm outside intensified, snow piling against my windows, wind finding new cracks to whistle through. Inside, a different kind of tension hung in the air. Sierra remained vigilant, seated on the edge of the couch beside her sleeping child. Her long fingers occasionally brushed the infant's forehead, checking its temperature. I noticed how her head turned sharply at every creak of the building, every distant sound that might signal danger. I busied myself at the small kitchenette, boiling water for tea. The silence between us wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't entirely hostile either. Your child? I said, finally breaking the quiet. Boy or girl? Sierra's eyes narrowed slightly. Valari don't distinguish gender until adulthood? She replied, her voice cool and measured. Neri will choose when the time comes. I nodded, filing that information away. Sorry, I don't know much about your people. Just what I picked up working relief stations during the evacuation. At the mention of the evacuation, something shifted in Sierra's posture, a tightening, a memory of pain. You were there at the evacuation points, she asked. I poured hot water into 2 mismatched mugs, dropping in the last of my tea bags. Yeah, South American Processing Center. I was a field medic. I passed her one of the mugs, careful not to move too suddenly. Not that it mattered much in the end. Sierra accepted the mug, wrapping her long fingers around it. The warmth seemed to surprise her. What do you mean? The old bitterness rose in my throat. We couldn't keep up. Too many wounded, not enough supplies. Then when the politicians started arguing about security risks and population control, I stopped myself. The memory's too raw even after all this time. Anyway, I quit. Yet you opened your door to us. Sierra observed, her golden eyes studying me intently. I shrugged, uncomfortable under her gaze. Moment of weakness. A sound so unexpected it took me a second to recognize it. Sierra had made a short, rough sound that might have been a laugh. Weakness, she repeated. On my world, we would call it something else. I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I changed the subject. Your baby needs calories. Proper nutrition. I gestured to the kitchen. I don't have much, but I can mix some protein powder with warm water. It's not ideal, but it would help, Sierra cut in, nodding. Neri hasn't nursed properly in days. I haven't been able to produce enough. There was shame in her admission, an emotion that crossed species barriers effortlessly. I turned away, giving her privacy as I mixed the protein solution in a small cup. I'm not going to turn you in, I said quietly, my back still to her. In case you're wondering. I know many humans who would, she replied, for the reward alone. I handed her the mixture. Yeah, I'm not them. Sierra tested the temperature of the liquid with her finger before gently rousing Neri. The infant's eyes fluttered open, those strange golden orbs focusing first on its mother, then drifting to me. No fear in those eyes, no judgment, just innocent curiosity. Sierra dipped her finger in the mixture and brought it to Neri's mouth. The infant suckled eagerly. Before the war, Sierra said suddenly, still focused on feeding her child, I was a botany specialist. I studied the interaction between native Valari plants and Earth specimens. Her voice took on a distant quality. We thought we could solve food shortages on both our worlds. I sat down across from them, giving them space. What happened? Sierra's jaw tightened. Politics happened. Fear happened. She looked up at me, her eyes hard. Your leaders decided we were invading, not collaborating. Our leaders responded with pride instead of patience. She returned to feeding Neri, and ordinary people paid the price. As always, something about her bitter certainty resonated with me. We sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the soft noises of Neri feeding and the howling wind outside. You should rest, I finally said, standing. Take the bed. I'll keep watch. Suspicion flickered across her features. Why? Because you have been running for days with an infant, and I've been sitting in this apartment doing nothing, I replied bluntly. You need it more. Cyrus studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. She gathered Neri close and moved toward the sleeping alcove. At the curtain that separated it from the main room, she paused. Evan Reyes, she said, her back to me. On my world, when someone saves your child's life, you owe them a debt that can never be repaid. She glanced over her shoulder, her golden eyes meeting mine. I will not forget this night. After she disappeared behind the curtain, I settled into my chair facing the door, my old service pistol on the side table within reach. Outside, the storm raged on, covering our tracks in the snow. Inside, something I hadn't felt in years stirred faintly in my chest. Hope, or maybe just purpose. Either way, it was dangerous. Morning came with muted light filtering through ice-crusted windows. I must have dozed off in the chair sometime before dawn, my neck now stiff and complaining. The storm had passed, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. I rose quietly, checking the security of the door and windows before moving to the kitchen. My supplies were limited, but I still had some freeze-dried egg powder and the end of a loaf of synthetic bread. Not much, but it would have to do. A soft sound from the sleeping alcove caught my attention. I turned to see Sierra standing at the edge of the curtain, Neri cradled against her chest. In the pale morning light, both looked better than they had the night before. The blue tinge had faded from the infant's skin, replaced by a healthier lavender hue. Sierra's eyes were clearer, though wariness still shadowed her features. Morning, babe, I said, keeping my voice low. Hungry? She nodded once. Yes, thank you. The awkward dance of strangers forced to share space resumed. I prepared food while Cyrus sat at my small table, Neri making soft chirping sounds in her arms. Occasionally, the infant's tiny hands would reach up, touching Cyrus' face with what seemed like affection. Neri looks better, I observed, setting plates on the table. Colors improved. Yes, too. Sierra agreed, her voice softening when she looked at her child. The warmth in food helped greatly. She hesitated, then added, We were very lucky to find your door. I shrugged uncomfortably. Right place, right time. We ate in silence for a while. I couldn't help but notice how Sierra savored each bite, eating slowly despite what must have been intense hunger. Valari were known for their discipline, their control. Even starving, she maintained her dignity. So what's your plan? I asked finally. The storm's passed. Patrols will be back out soon. Tension immediately returned to her shoulders. We must reach the southern transport hub, she said. There is a ship leaving in 3 days that will take refugees to the outer colonies. I frowned. That's on the other side of the city, through multiple checkpoints. I am aware, she replied, her voice clipped. But we have no choice. It is the last transport for a month and... She glanced down at Neri. We cannot remain here that long. The unspoken reality hung between us. The enforcement division had been cracking down harder each month. Stories circulated about disappeared refugees, about processing centers that were really just holding pens before deportation to radiation-poisoned homeworlds. "You need better clothes," I said abruptly, "and documents, and a better way to keep the baby warm." Sarah watched me cautiously. "Yes." I got up and moved to a storage locker built into the wall. With a bit of effort, I pried open the false back, revealing a hidden compartment. From it, I pulled out a small bundle wrapped in waterproof material. "Emergency supplies," I explained, returning to the table. Never thought I'd actually use them. I unwrapped the bundle, revealing a set of civilian clothes. Neutral colors, nondescript, a small medical kit, and a plastic card. "Transit pass," I said, tapping the card. "Not registered to anyone. Should get you through the automated checkpoints on the outskirts." Sarah's golden eyes widened slightly. "You prepared for this? To help refugees?" I felt a flush of embarrassment. After I quit the relief corps, I thought maybe I'd still help sometimes. "Unofficially." I gestured vaguely. "Never did though, just kept the kit." "Until now," she said quietly. "Yeah, until now." I showed her how to use the transit pass, explained which checkpoints to avoid, which routes were less patrolled. As I spoke, I realized I was falling back into old patterns, the careful planning of emergency evacuations routes and contingencies mapped out with lives in the balance. Neri began to fuss, making small, distressed sounds. Sarah immediately checked the infant's wrappings. "The little one needs cleaning," she said, a note of concern in her voice. "Bathroom's through there." I nodded toward a narrow door. "Not much, but there's running water. Usually." Sarah hesitated, then stood with Nari. As she passed me, she paused. Would you hold Neri while I prepare?" The request caught me off guard. Trust didn't come easily in this world, especially not between species with our history. Holding her child, her vulnerable, precious child, was no small thing. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual while my heart pounded unexpectedly. "I've handled babies before." With careful movements, Sarah transferred Neri to my arms. The infant was surprisingly light, its body temperature slightly cooler than a human baby's would be. Neri looked up at me with those big golden eyes, unblinking and curious. "I'll just be a moment," Sarah said, disappearing into the bathroom. I stood awkwardly, holding this tiny alien life in my arms. Neri made a small trilling sound and reached up one perfect, miniature hand toward my face. Without thinking, I gently caught it with my finger. Tiny fingers wrapped around mine with surprising strength. "Hey there," I whispered. "Hang in there, little one. We'll get you somewhere safe." A lump formed in my throat unexpectedly. How long had it been since I'd held a child? Since I'd felt this particular mix of protectiveness and wonder? Neri continued to grip my finger, those golden eyes never leaving my face. When Sarah returned, she found us like that, frozen in a moment of connection that transcended species. Something flickered across her face, surprise, then something softer. "Neri likes you," she said simply, taking her child back with gentle hands. "Good judge of character," I replied with a half smile. As Sarah tended to Neri, I found myself moving around the apartment with new purpose, gathering supplies, checking sight lines from the windows planning. For the first time in years, my actions felt meaningful, necessary, like I was part of something again, instead of just surviving. The day passed in this strange new rhythm. We spoke little, but the silence had transformed from tense to companionable. As evening approached, I showed Sarah how to use the heater more efficiently, how to block the drafts from the windows. She showed me how to hold Neri in a way that soothed the infant to sleep. Small exchanges building something fragile between us. That night, as snow began to fall again, outside, I insisted Sarah and Neri take the bed again while I kept watch. This time, she didn't argue. As I sat in my chair, facing the door, listening to the soft sounds of their breathing from behind the curtain, I realized with a jolt that for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. And that scared me more than any patrol. The pounding at the door came just after dawn. I jolted awake in my chair, instantly alert. Sarah was already standing in the doorway of the sleeping alcove, Neri clutched protectively to her chest, her eyes wide with the alarm. "Inspection," a voice called from the hallway. "Open up by order of the City Enforcement Division." I signaled Sarah to hide as I moved quickly to the door. She disappeared behind the curtain without a sound. Taking a deep breath, I composed my features into an expression of annoyed indifference before opening the door. Two men stood in the hallway. They wore the gray uniforms of city inspectors, but the subtle bulk under their jackets suggested they were armed. Not regular inspectors then. Enforcement agents using inspection as cover. "What's this about?" I asked, letting irritation color my voice. "It's barely dawn." The taller agent stepped forward, his face expressionless. "Routine building inspection. New protocols after the power outages." He held up a tablet displaying official-looking documentation. "We need to check all units for compliance with safety regulations." It was a thin cover, but enough to get them through the door legally. "Fine," I sighed, stepping back. "But make it quick. I'm heading to work soon." The agents entered, their eyes scanning the apartment with practiced efficiency. I noticed how they checked corners, sightlines, potential hiding places, not the behavior of actual building inspectors. "You live alone, Mr.?" the first agent asked. "Reyes, and yeah, just me." I crossed my arms, watching them closely. "Place isn't much, but it passes code." The second agent, shorter and with cold eyes, ran a handheld scanner along the walls. "Been here long?" 3 years, I replied. "Like I said, nothing special, but it's mine." The first agent moved toward my kitchenette, examining the appliances with feigned interest. "We've had reports of unusual activity in this building." "Wouldn't surprise me," I shrugged. "Couple of units down the hall are definitely running home distilleries. Terrible stuff, too." The agent didn't smile. "Not that kind of unusual. We're looking for individuals harboring undocumented visitors, specifically non-human visitors." My heart rate picked up, but I kept my expression neutral. "Haven't seen any. Wouldn't want to either. Too much trouble." The second agent had moved dangerously close to the sleeping alcove. He paused at the curtain, his scanner beeping softly. "Mind if I check in here?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. "My bedroom," I said flatly. "Nothing in there but a messy bed and dirty laundry." He pulled back the curtain anyway. I held my breath, but when I glanced over, I saw only rumpled bedding. No sign of Sarah or Neri. My respect for her survival skills notched higher. "Seems you keep your place warmer than most," the first agent commented, gesturing to my heater. "Power's expensive these days." "I get cold easily," I replied. "Bad circulation." The agents continued their inspection, moving with deliberate slowness. I could feel sweat forming on my back, despite the cool air. Finally, after what seemed like hours, they appeared satisfied. The first agent nodded to his partner, who moved to the door. "Everything appears to be in order, Mr. Rea," the first agent said, his tone neutral. "Though I should mention that we'll be conducting follow-up inspections throughout the week. With the recent security concerns, we can't be too careful." The threat was clear. They weren't convinced. They'd be back. "Whatever you need to do," I said, moving to open the door for them. "I've got nothing to hide." As they reached the threshold, the first agent turned back. "One more thing, Mr. Reyes. If you do happen to encounter any undocumented visitors, there's a substantial reward for information leading to their apprehension, particularly for Valari." He handed me a small card with a contact number. "Something to consider with power costs being what they are." I took the card, forcing a thoughtful nod. "I'll keep that in mind." "See that you do. Harboring fugitives is a Class 1 offense now. That's 15 years in the labor colonies minimum." With that final warning, they left. I locked the door behind them and leaned against it, releasing a shaky breath. Only then did I notice the silence, no sound of Neri's chirps or movements. "Sierra," I called softly, moving back into the apartment. For a terrifying moment, I thought they'd somehow fled during the inspection, or worse, been discovered and taken. Then I heard a faint sound from above. Looking up, I noticed the maintenance hatch in the ceiling was slightly ajar. A moment later, Sarah descended gracefully from the opening, Neri strapped securely to her chest with torn strips of blanket. The infant was completely silent, as if understanding the need for absolute quiet. "You hid in the crawl space," I said, impressed despite my lingering fear. "Smart. A necessary skill," Sarah replied, her voice tight with tension. "One learns quickly or dies." She looked toward the door. "They will return." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I agreed. "And with more than just scanners next time." I ran a hand through my hair, thinking rapidly. "You can't stay here. We need to move you. Today." Sarah's golden eyes studied me intently. The question hung in the air between us. Until now, I'd been helping them survive the night, offering temporary shelter. This was different. This was active involvement, risk commitment. I thought about the empty years behind me, the purposeless days, the faces of those I'd failed to save. "Yeah," I said finally. I know someone who might be able to help, an old friend from the war." Relief and something like gratitude flickered across Sierra's alien features. She placed a hand on Neri's back protectively. "Thank you, Evan Ricius." I nodded, already moving to gather essential supplies. "Don't thank me yet. Getting across the city to the transport hub just got a lot more complicated." "We are accustomed to complications," Sierra said, a new determination in her voice. "Neri and I have survived worse odds." As I packed, I found myself wondering about her story, what she'd endured, what she'd lost. But there was no time for that now. The clock was ticking. "We leave at dusk," I said. "The patrols change shifts then. It gives us our best window." Sierra nodded, already preparing Neri for the journey ahead. As I watched them, I realized I'd just committed myself to something I'd sworn never to do again, put myself at risk for others. Get involved. Care. Yet somehow it felt like the first right decision I'd made in years. The comm unit crackled with static as I waited for Marcus to answer. Old tech but secure, no digital footprint, no way to trace. The kind of precaution that had seemed paranoid before the war and essential after. "This is Shaw." Marcus's gruff voice finally came through, cautious and low. "It's Reyes," I said, keeping my voice down, though Sierra could still hear me from across the room. "I need to call in that favor." A pause, then, "Damn, Evan. It's been, 3 years? Must be serious if you're breaking radio silence." "It is." I glanced at Sierra, who was feeding Neri a mixture of protein solution and water. "I've got passengers who need transport to the southern hub. Special passengers." Marcus understood immediately. "Visitors from out of town, huh? 1 adult, 1 infant. Enforcement's already sniffing around my place." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear Marcus weighing the risks, calculating the danger. Finally, "The old maintenance tunnel under 4th Street. You remember it?" "Yeah, it had been one of our evacuation routes during the war before the government sealed most of them. Meet me there at 2200 hours. Bring only what you can carry. And Evan," his voice dropped even lower, "make damn sure you're not followed." "Copy that. And be prepared for backup plans. Things are, tighter than they were even a few months ago." The comm went silent. I put the unit away and turned to Sierra, who was watching me with those unblinking golden eyes. "We have transport?" she asked. "Maybe. Marcus is a smuggler, now specializes in helping refugees reach the transport hubs. If anyone can get you there, it's him." I moved to the window, checking the street below for any sign of surveillance. "But it's not going to be easy." "It never is," Sierra replied, her voice matter of fact. She finished feeding Neri and gently patted the infant's back. "Your friend, can he be trusted?" "A fair question. Marcus Shaw was my commanding officer during the war. When the politicians started using refugees as pawns, he resigned his commission in protest, lost everything." I turned back to face her. "He's been helping people like you ever since. Underground railroad of sorts." Sierra's head tilted slightly. "Underground railroad. Old Earth history," I explained. "People helping others escape injustice at great personal risk." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "We had similar networks on Vilar. Before the bombings." A shadow passed across her face. "Before everything burned." We spent the remaining hours preparing. I showed Sierra how to use the transit pass, which checkpoints to avoid the hand signals Marcus and his people used. She absorbed it all quickly, her mind clearly strategic, adaptable. As evening approached, I dug out more supplies from my hidden cache. A smaller heater for Neri. Better cold weather clothing, a stunner disguised as a maintenance tool. Then I found something I'd almost forgotten, a small medical kit with Valari physiology supplements. Leftovers from my relief corps days. "Here," I said, handing the kit to Sierra. "Might help keep Neri's strength up during the journey." She examined the supplements, surprise evident on her features. "These are specifically formulated for Valari children. They're rare now." I shrugged uncomfortably. I kept what I could when the relief centers shut down. Never knew if they'd be needed someday. Sierra looked up at me, something shifting in her golden eyes. You cared even then, when your people turned against mine. Not all of us did, I said quietly. There were plenty who fought against the policies, too few maybe, but we existed. She nodded slowly, tucking the supplements carefully into her pack. On Valar too, there were those who argued for peace, for understanding. Her voice tightened. The loudest voices drowned them out, as always happens in war. A moment of shared understanding passed between us, recognition of the same tragedies playing out across different worlds. Darkness fell, bringing with it a tense silence. We were ready to move, just waiting for the right moment. Sierra had prepared Neri with extra layers, a special wrapping that would keep the infant secure against her body and maintain vital warmth. When we reached the tunnel, I explained, "Stay behind me. Marcus will have security measures in place, signals countersigns. Let me do the talking." Sierra nodded, adjusting Neri's wrappings one final time. "And if we're separated, make for the southern transport hub, Dock 17, Slip 22. That's where the refugee ship will be." I handed her a small metal disc. "Show this to anyone wearing a blue scarf. It marks you as under Marcus's protection." Oh, she took the disc, examining the simple symbol etched into its surface before securing it in an inner pocket. "You've done this before, though." "Not exactly, Sism," I admitted, "but I've planned evacuations, back during the war and after." A distant siren wailed somewhere in the city, making us both tense. It was time to go. I checked the corridor first, confirming it was empty, before signaling Sierra to follow. We moved quietly through the building, using service stairs instead of the main stairwell, avoiding the few functioning security cameras. Outside, the night was bitter cold, our breath-forming clouds in the air. I'd chosen dark clothing for both of us, nondescript, forgettable. Sierra had wrapped a scarf around her head, partially concealing her distinctly alien features. From a distance, in the poor light, she might pass for human. We kept to the shadows, moving from one abandoned storefront to another, freezing at the sound of patrol vehicles. Twice we had to duck into alleyways as enforcement drones buzzed overhead, their searchlights sweeping the streets. Sierra moved with impressive stealth despite carrying Neri. No wasted motion, no hesitation. I wondered again about her past. She moved like someone with military training, not a botanist. As we approached 4th Street, the checkpoints became more frequent. We had to detour 3 times, adding precious minutes to our journey. My anxiety grew with each delay. Marcus couldn't wait long if we were late. Finally, we reached the maintenance tunnel entrance, a rusted service door in the side of an abandoned subway station. I checked our surroundings carefully before approaching Sarah close behind me. The door was locked as expected. I tapped a specific pattern. 3 quick, 2 slow, 3 quick again. Old military code from the war. Nothing happened for a long moment. I was about to try again when the door opened a crack, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. "Rainy season in Singapore," a voice whispered from inside the first half of the countersign. "But clear skies in Cairo," I responded, completing the phrase. The door opened wider, revealing Marcus's craggy face, aged beyond his years by stress and life underground. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Sierra and Neri, but he quickly gestured us inside. "You're late," he said, securing the door behind us. "Was about to abort." "Enforcement increased the checkpoints," I explained. "Had to take the long way." Marcus nodded, his expression grim. "They're cracking down all over. Got 3 sweeps just tonight in the warehouse district." He looked at Sierra, who stood tall despite her obvious exhaustion. "Ma'am," he said with a respectful nod, "we'll get you and your little one to the transport, but there's been a complication." My heart sank. "What kind of complication?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the surge of anxiety. Marcus led us deeper into the tunnel, switching on a low-powered light that cast long shadows against the crumbling concrete walls. The air was damp and cold, making me worry about Neri. "They've moved up the departure time," Marcus explained, his voice low. "Ship's leaving tomorrow night, not in 3 days. They got spooked by the increased patrols." Sierra's posture stiffened. "Tomorrow, but that means we need to move faster, take more risks," Marcus confirmed, grimacing. "I've got a transport waiting half a click from here. It'll get us closer to the hub, but there's a major checkpoint between here and there." He glanced at me. "Like the old days, Reyes, improvise and overcome." The phrase hit me like a physical blow. memories flooding back of field hospitals, of desperate evacuations under fire, of Sarah. "We'll make it," I said more confidently than I felt. "We've handled worse." Marcus raised an eyebrow, but he didn't comment. Instead, he handed us each a small earpiece. "Short-range comms. If we get separated, Channel 3 is secure." He looked at Sarah. "Ma'am, you should know the risks. If you're caught, it's not just deportation anymore. They're making examples of Valari refugees, especially those with children." Sarah's golden eyes flashed in the dim light. "I am aware of the risks, human. I have been running since my world burned." She adjusted Neri's wrapping, the infant unnaturally quiet, as if sensing the danger. "We will not be caught." Marcus nodded, a new respect in his expression. "All right then, let's move." We followed him through the winding maintenance tunnel, the path occasionally blocked by debris or collapsed sections that required careful navigation. Despite her fatigue, Sarah moved with grace, never complaining, even when we had to squeeze through particularly tight spaces. "You said you were a botanist," I said quietly as we walked, trying to distract her from the discomfort. "Before the war." She glanced at me, surprise flickering across her features at the personal question. "Yes, I specialized in xenobotanical adaptation, studying how Valari plants might thrive in Earth soil and vice versa." A faint smile, the first I'd seen, touched her lips. "I had a particular interest in your world's flowering plants. We had nothing like them on Valar." The image of this tall, warrior-like alien tending to Earth flowers was strangely poignant. "What brought you to Earth then?" I asked. "Before everything happened." Sarah was quiet for a moment, navigating around a fallen support beam before answering. "I was part of a scientific exchange, one of the first. We believed our worlds could help each other. Valar had advanced agricultural technologies, Earth had biological diversity. We lacked." Her voice hardened. "Then came the accusations. Espionage, resource theft, territorial disputes in the outer colonies." "Politics," I muttered. "Yes, always politics." She adjusted near eye, who had begun to stir. "When the fighting began, I was working at a research station in your southern hemisphere. My mate was serving as a cultural liaison with your governments." Pain flashed across her face. "He was among the first casualties when the diplomatic compound was bombed. The personal cost of war always the same regardless of species." "I'm sorry," I said inadequately. Sarah nodded once, acknowledging without dwelling. "And you were a healer, but you speak like a warrior." I hadn't talked about this in years, hadn't wanted to, but here in this dark tunnel with danger pressing in from all sides, the words came. My sister Sarah and I both joined the Relief Corps when the refugee crisis started. We weren't military, we were medics, humanitarian workers. We thought we could help. The familiar bitterness rose in my throat. We were stationed at Evacuation Point Delta when the riots broke out. Security forces versus desperate refugees, with us caught in the middle. Sarah was treating a Valari child when a stray bullet hit her. Sarah's gaze was steady, unflinching. "And you could not save her." "I tried, God, I tried." My voice cracked, the memory still razor sharp. "But the wound was too severe and they'd restricted medical supplies for non-humans. By the time I got what I needed for her, it was too late." I took a deep breath. I quit the next day. Couldn't be part of a system that let that happen. We walked in silence for a moment, the only sounds our footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. "My mother was a field medic in the civil conflicts on Valar," Sarah said finally. "She used to say that in saving others, we save ourselves." She looked down at Neri, sleeping peacefully despite everything. I did not understand her meaning until I held my child for the first time. Before I could respond, Marcus held up a hand, signaling us to stop. "We're approaching the exit," he whispered. "Security sweep should be passing overhead right about now." We waited in tense silence, hearing the faint hum of a drone passing above. After it faded, Marcus continued forward, leading us to a rusted metal ladder that disappeared upward into darkness. "Transport's waiting in the alley," he explained. "Cargo hauler disguised as a maintenance vehicle. It'll get us past the outer checkpoints, but the final approach to the hub is on foot. Too many scanners." He started up the ladder, then paused, looking down at us. "One more thing you should know. The Shaybit's not going to the main colonies. Those routes are too heavily monitored now. This one's headed for an independent settlement on Proxima B. Rougher conditions, but they don't ask questions. Sierra nodded. Anywhere is better than here, or what remains of Velar. As Marcus continued upward, Sierra turned to me. You never said, why are you helping us truly? Her golden eyes searched my face. Your sister's death could have made you hate my kind. Many humans do. I considered the question carefully, searching for an answer I hadn't fully articulated even to myself. Sarah died trying to save a Valari child, I said finally. Helping you helps me believe her death meant something, that somewhere, somehow, we can be better than our worst instincts. Understanding passed between us, a bridge across species, across history. In that moment, I saw not an alien refugee, but a person, a mother, a survivor just like me. We should go, I said, gesturing to the ladder. Sierra shifted Neri to a more secure position, then put her hand briefly on my arm the first time she had touched me voluntarily. Your sister would be proud, Evan Reyes. The simple words hit me like a physical force breaking something loose inside that had been frozen for years. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and followed her up the ladder toward whatever awaited us above. The transport was exactly where Marcus had promised, a battered maintenance vehicle with faded city logos on its sides, inconspicuous enough to avoid a second glance. The driver, a woman with sharp eyes and a scar running from her temple to jaw, nodded curtly as we approached. 3 passengers, she said, eyeing Sierra and Neri. Tight fit in the back. We'll manage, Marcus replied, opening the rear doors to reveal a cramped cargo space filled with maintenance equipment, spare parts, and hidden compartments. You two in here, he directed Sierra and me. I'll ride up front with Talia. The space was claustrophobic, barely enough room for the 2 of us to sit hunched among the equipment. Once the doors closed, we were plunged into near darkness, the only light coming from thin seams around the door edges. I could feel Sierra's tension beside me, her breathing carefully controlled. You okay, Wazika? I whispered as the vehicle rumbled to life. Yes, she replied, though her voice was tight. Valeri are not naturally comfortable in enclosed spaces. We evolved in open plains. I remembered reading that somewhere during my relief course training. Focus on Neri, I suggested. Sometimes having someone else to worry about helps. She shifted slightly, adjusting the infant, who remained remarkably quiet. This is not my first time hiding in a cargo hold, Evan Reyes. The transport lurched forward, beginning its journey through the frozen city streets. I tried to track our progress by the turns and stops, but soon lost my bearings. Every time we slowed, my heart rate spiked. Each checkpoint was a potential disaster. First checkpoint coming up, Marcus's voice crackled through our earpieces. Standard ID scan. Stay absolutely still. We froze, barely breathing. I could hear muffled voices outside the driver and what must be a patrol officer. The scan would detect life forms, but the transport's shielding should mask our signatures enough to register as equipment, heat sources, not people. After an agonizing minute, the transport moved forward again. Clear, Marcus confirmed. 2 more to go. Sierra released a breath she'd been holding. Even in the dim light, I could see the strain on her face. Tell me about Proxima B, I said softly, trying to distract her. The settlement there. She seemed grateful for the conversation. It is a small colony, she replied. Established jointly by human and Valari scientists before the war, is now a refuge for those seeking neutrality. The atmosphere requires filtration for both our species, but the soil is rich. They say plants from both worlds thrive there. Sounds like a good place for a botanist and her child. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Perhaps, if we reach it. The transport slowed again. Second checkpoint, Marcus warned. This one has bioscanners. Activating countermeasures. A soft hum filled the cargo space, portable scramblers designed to confuse the more sophisticated scanners. Military tech, not something civilians could access. Another sign of how deep Marcus's network ran. This stop lasted longer. I could hear more voices, questions being asked. Beside me, Sierra tensed, one hand protectively covering Neri. They're doing a manual inspection, Marcus hissed. Be ready. My hand moved to the stunner concealed in my jacket. If they opened the doors. Heavy footsteps approached the back of the transport. A sharp rap on the metal doors, then a voice. "Opening for inspection." Marcus's voice came urgent in our earpieces. "Maintenance hatch right side panel, now." Without hesitation, Sarah and I scrambled toward the barely visible outline of a small maintenance access panel. I pushed it open, revealing a tight space between the inner and outer walls of the transport. A smuggler's hide barely large enough for one person, let alone two and an infant. "You first," I whispered urgently. Sarah slipped inside, with Neri pressing herself into the cramped space. I followed, pulling the panel closed just as I heard the rear doors being unlocked. We were pressed together in absolute darkness, barely able to breathe. Sarah's face was inches from mine, Neri sandwiched carefully between us. I could feel the infant's soft movements, miraculously still quiet. Light flooded the cargo area beyond our hiding place. Through a tiny gap in the panel, I could see a uniformed officer climbing into the transport, scanning equipment in hand. "Routine maintenance run," I heard Talia explain. "Heading to the South Hub substations. Got a power relay failure there." The officer moved methodically through the cargo, checking equipment, scanning containers. Each step brought him closer to our hiding place. When he was directly outside our panel, he paused. The scanner in his hand beeped softly. "Getting some odd readings here," he said, suspicion in his voice. My hand tightened on the stunner. If he found us, I'd have one shot, just one, before the whole checkpoint came down on us. "Probably the auxiliary power cells," Marcus replied smoothly. "They emit a similar signature to bio readings. Happens all the time." The officer hesitated. I held my breath, feeling Sarah do the same. Neri, sensing the tension, began to squirm slightly. I silently willed the infant to remain quiet just a little longer. After what seemed like eternity, the officer stepped back. "Clear," he called. "Move along." The doors slammed shut, plunging the cargo area back into darkness. We didn't move, waiting for Marcus's signal. "Hold position," his voice came through the earpiece. "Not clear yet." The transport started moving again. Only when we'd been driving for several minutes did Marcus give the all clear. "You can come out now, but stay quiet. We're entering the high security zone." We carefully extracted ourselves from the hidden compartment, both of us stiff from the tight quarters. Sarah checked Neri, who had remained remarkably calm throughout the ordeal. "Your child has the soul of a warrior," I whispered, impressed. "Valari infants instinctively understand danger," she replied softly. "An evolutionary adaptation from our predator-heavy homeworld." The transport suddenly swerved sharply, throwing us against the wall. "We've been tagged," Marcus's urgent voice came through. "Patrol drone must have picked up our heat signature. Everyone brace, we're going off-road." The vehicle accelerated, then turned abruptly down what felt like an alley or side street. The ride became rougher equipment, shifting dangerously around us. "Plan B," Marcus announced. "Can't take you all the way to the hub now. We'll drop you at the river crossing. Shaw Network will guide you from there." My stomach tightened. The river crossing meant the abandoned industrial zone, dangerous territory even without enforcement on our trail. The transport screeched to a halt, and the rear doors flew open. Marcus stood there, tension evident in every line of his face. "Out now," he ordered. "2 patrol vehicles converging on our position. We'll lead them away, give you a head start." We scrambled out into a narrow alley between towering derelict factories. The air was bitter cold, our breath forming clouds in the dim light. "Head east along the river," Marcus instructed rapidly, pressing a small device into my hand. "Signal transponder. Our people will find you." He looked at Sarah and Neri, his expression softening briefly. "Good luck." Before we could respond, he was back in the transport, which roared away down the alley, deliberately loud, creating a diversion for us. "This way," I said, orienting myself. "Stay close to the buildings, less chance of being spotted from above." We moved quickly through the industrial wasteland, weaving between abandoned equipment and collapsed structures. In the distance, I could hear the wail of patrol sirens pursuing Marcus and Talia. I sent up a silent prayer for their safety. Sarah kept pace with me despite her burden, her movements fluid and silent. The cold seemed to bother her less than it did me, another Valari adaptation. We'd covered perhaps half a kilometer when the sharp whine of a drone cut through the night air. I pulled Sarah into the shadow of a massive storage tank, pressing ourselves against its rusted surface. "Enforcement drone," I whispered. "Thermal imaging." Sarah's eyes widened slightly, but she remained calm. The river, she said, could mask our heat signatures. She was right, the cold water would confuse the thermal scanners. But it was dangerous as the current was strong, the water polluted, and freezing. Worth the risk, I decided. Let's go. We changed direction, heading directly for the riverbank visible between crumbling warehouse structures. The drone's whine grew louder, sweeping in a search pattern behind us. As we reached the river's edge, a spotlight suddenly illuminated the ground 20 meters to our right. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Halt, Enforcement Division, remain where you are." A patrol had found us, not the drone, but officers on foot. I caught a glimpse of dark uniforms moving between buildings. "Run!" I hissed, pushing Sierra toward a narrow service bridge spanning the river ahead. We sprinted across open ground, fully exposed now. A shot cracked behind us, the energy pulse hitting a metal drum to our left, sending sparks flying. "Halt or we will use lethal force," the amplified voice commanded. The bridge was 30 meters away. 20, 10. Another shot closer this time. I felt the heat of it pass my shoulder. As we reached the bridge, a patrol officer appeared at its far end, weapon raised. We were trapped. Without hesitation, I pulled the stunner from my jacket and fired. The officer dropped, temporarily paralyzed, but otherwise unharmed. "Go!" I pushed Sierra forward. "I'll hold them off." But Sierra didn't move. Instead, she thrust Neri into my arms. "No, take my child. I will delay them." Before I could protest, she pulled a small device from her clothing, a Volari pulse weapon, military grade. Where she had gotten it, I couldn't imagine. "You were more than a botanist," I realized aloud. A grim smile touched her lips. "Botanical Research Division, attached to the Volari Defense Forces." She positioned herself at the bridge entrance, weapon ready. "Go, please, save Neri." In that moment, I made a decision I hoped I wouldn't regret. I handed Neri back to her. "We go together, all of us." Her golden eyes widened in surprise, then understanding. Without another word, she secured Neri and readied her weapon. Together, we crossed the bridge, firing at pursuing officers, aiming to disable rather than kill. On the far side, we plunged into a maze of abandoned processing plants, the pursuit close behind. "The transponder," Sierra gasped as we ran. "Activate it now." I fumbled with the device Marcus had given me, finding the activation switch. It emitted a soft pulse of blue light, then went dark, broadcasting our position to the Shaw network. We ducked into what had once been a control room, momentarily out of sight of our pursuers. Through a broken window, I could see patrol officers spreading out, searching methodically. It was only a matter of time. "If they find us," Sierra said quietly, checking Neri, who was somehow still silent, "promise me you will take Neri and run. Do not wait for me." "That's not happening," I replied firmly. "We're getting out of this together." A sound at the doorway made us both freeze. I raised my stunner, Sierra her pulse weapon. But instead of an enforcement officer, a young woman with close-cropped hair and determined eyes appeared. She wore a blue scarf, Marcus's signal. "Shaw network," she said simply. "Follow me." Quickly, without questioning, we followed her through a hidden access panel in the floor, down into tunnels that must have once served the industrial complex. Behind us, I could hear the sounds of the patrol entering the building we'd just left. Our guide moved with confidence through the labyrinthine passages, occasionally consulting a handheld device that glowed faintly in the darkness. "Marcus?" I asked as we hurried along. "Diverted the patrols successfully," she replied without slowing. "He'll meet us at the final approach to the hub." After what seemed like hours of navigating the underground network, we emerged into a vast chamber that had once been a subterranean loading dock. Several people were gathered there, all wearing the blue scarves that marked them as part of Marcus's underground railroad. And there was Marcus himself, looking haggard, but a live relief evident on his face as he saw us. "Cutting it close, Reyes," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Always did have a flair for the dramatic." "Learn from the best," I replied, the tension of the chase finally beginning to ease from my shoulders. Sierra stepped forward, Neri now awake and making soft chirping sounds. "Your people took great risks for us," she said formally. "The Volari do not forget such debts." Marcus nodded, accepting her words with the gravity they deserved. "The ship's waiting," he said. "One final stretch, and you'll be aboard." He looked at me. "Both of you, if that's the plan." His words hung in the air between us. I looked at Sarah, at Neri, and realized I hadn't actually considered what would happen after we reached the ship. My focus had been entirely on getting them to safety. Before I could respond, a young man rushed into the chamber. "Patrols reached the western tunnel," he reported urgently. 5 minutes, maybe less." Marcus's expression hardened. "Move out now." As the group mobilized with practiced efficiency, Sierra caught my arm. She said softly, "What will you do?" It was a question I didn't have time to answer as we were ushered toward our final escape route, but it echoed in my mind as we prepared for the last desperate dash to freedom. The southern transport hub loomed before us, a massive complex of loading docks and launch platforms silhouetted against the pre-dawn sky. From our vantage point in an abandoned maintenance tunnel, I could see the security perimeter patrol officers' scanner arrays, drone flights on crisscrossing in regular patterns. And beyond them, docked at Slip 22 as promised, a battered cargo vessel with no identifying markings. The refugee ship. Marcus had gathered the 12 members of his network who'd been involved in our escape, outlining the final phase of the plan with brisk efficiency. Two-part approach, he explained, pointing to a schematic displayed on the portable holo projector. First team creates a diversion at the east entrance, small explosion, nothing harmful but enough to draw attention and resources. Second team escorts our passengers through the service tunnels to the emergency maintenance access here. He indicated a point near the dock. Ship's captain is expecting you. Once you're aboard, they launch immediately. He looked around at the determined faces of his team. Standard protocols: anyone caught denies all knowledge of the network, carries no identifying materials. You know the drill. The group dispersed to their assigned positions, moving with the quiet competence of people who had done this many times before. Marcus turned to Sierra and me. "Last chance to back out, he said, his eyes on me. "Once you're on that ship, there's no coming back. Not for years, maybe never." I looked at Sierra, who was preparing Neri for the final leg of our journey, securing the infant in fresh wrappings provided by one of Marcus's people. We hadn't spoken about what would happen once we reached the ship. Everything had moved too quickly. "I haven't decided yet," I admitted. Marcus nodded, understanding in his weathered features. "Sometimes the decision makes itself." He checked his timepiece. 2 minutes to diversion. Get ready." As the others moved into position, Sierra approached me, Neri cradled in her arms. The infant was awake, those golden eyes taking in everything with uncanny awareness. "You have fulfilled your promise, Evan Reyes," she said formally. "You have brought us to the ship. Your debt, if you felt one, is paid." I nodded, strangely reluctant to acknowledge the completion of our journey. "I just hope you find safety, both of you." Sierra studied my face, her alien features unreadable. "Will you come with us?" she asked directly. The question hung between us, weighted with implications neither of us had time to fully explore. In the days we'd spent together, was it really only days something had formed between us? Not romance, not exactly, but connection. Understanding. The beginnings of trust. And Neri. I looked at the infant, who reached one tiny hand toward me as if sensing my attention. I'd grown attached to this small alien life more than I'd expected or intended. But leaving Earth meant leaving everything, what little I had left. My apartment, my few possessions, the grave marker I'd placed for Sarah in the memorial garden. The planet itself, despite its flaws and failures. Before I could answer, a distant explosion rocked the complex. The diversion. "That's our cue," Marcus said sharply. "Move now." We rushed through the final stretch of tunnel, emerging onto a service platform just 50 meters from the docked ship. Ahead of us, I could see most of the security personnel running toward the site of the explosion, leaving only a skeleton crew guarding the immediate dock area. "Wait for the second signal," Marcus cautioned, holding us back in the shadows. Moments later, the lights along the eastern perimeter suddenly went dark, the second diversion a power outage in the security systems. "Now, yeah," Marcus ordered. We sprinted across the open area, Marcus and 2 of his people flanking us protectively. Sierra moved with surprising speed despite carrying Nerish, her determination evident in every step. A shout went up from one of the remaining guards we'd been spotted. A warning shot flashed overhead, illuminating the dock in harsh white light. "Keep moving," Marcus yelled, pulling his own weapon and returning fire, aiming high distraction, not injury. We reached the boarding ramp of the ship, its engines already humming to life, preparing for emergency departure. A figure appeared at the top of the ramp, a grizzled human woman in captain's garb. "Get aboard," she shouted. "We're launching now." Marcus and his team formed a protective line covering our ascent up the ramp. "Go!" Marcus urged, firing again at pursuing the guards. "I'll hold them here." I hesitated at the base of the ramp, torn between rushing forward with Sierra and staying to help Marcus. "Evan," Sierra called from halfway up the ramp, her voice urgent. "Come!" In that split second of indecision, a guard broke through the line, weapon raised and aimed directly at Sierra and Neri. Without thought, I threw myself forward, tackling him to the ground. We struggled briefly before I managed to knock him unconscious with a blow to the head. As I rose, breathing hard, I saw Marcus take a hit not fatal, but enough to drop him to one knee. His team was being pushed back, overwhelmed by reinforcements arriving from other sections of the hub. The ship's engines roared louder, the ramp beginning to retract. It was now or never. I made my decision. "Marcus," I shouted, rushing to his side and helping him to his feet. "Come on!" Together, we staggered up the closing ramp, his team covering our retreat with final suppressive fire, before they too scattered into the shadows of the hub, disappearing as they'd been trained to do. We collapsed inside the ship's cargo bay as the hatch sealed behind us. The deck lurched beneath us as the vessel disengaged from its moorings, emergency launch protocols overriding the hub's automated systems. Sierra was there immediately, helping Marcus to a nearby bench. "He's injured," she said, examining the wound with experienced hands. "Just a graze." Marcus grimaced. "I've had worse." The ship shuddered as it accelerated away from the dock, artificial gravity not yet fully engaged. Through a small viewport, I could see the hub receding rapidly, patrol vessels scrambling to launch in pursuit. "They won't catch us," the captain announced, entering the cargo bay. "We've got a head start and have better engines than those patrol boats. Once we clear atmosphere, we'll jump to FTL." She nodded briskly to Marcus. "Shaw, been a while." "Too long, Carter," he replied with a pained smile. "Thanks for the pickup." "Least I could do," she responded. "You filled my ship with enough refugees over the years." She turned her attention to Sierra and Neri. "Welcome aboard the Horizon's Edge, ma'am." "Same, not much to look at, but she'll get you where you need to go." Sierra nodded formally. "Thank you, Captain. My child and I are grateful for your courage." Captain Carter's weathered face softened slightly at the sight of Neri. "Got a soft spot for the little ones," she admitted. "Too many of them caught up in this mess." She turned to me. "And you're not on my manifest." "Last-minute addition," Marcus interjected before I could respond. "If you'll have him?" The captain shrugged. "One more mouth makes little difference. We've got a 6-week journey to Proxima B. You can earn your keep by helping in the engine room. Always need extra hands there." With that, she returned to the bridge, leaving us to settle in. A medical officer arrived to tend to Marcus's wound, and Sarah found a quiet corner to care for Neri, who had begun making hungry sounds. I stood by the viewport, watching Earth grow smaller in the distance. I'd made my decision in an instant, based on instinct rather than careful thought. Now, as the reality of it sank in, I felt a strange mix of loss and liberation. I was leaving behind a life of isolation, of purposeless survival. What lay ahead was unknown, uncertain, but somehow it felt right. Marcus approached, his wound bandaged, limping slightly but otherwise intact. "That was quite a leap of faith back there," he commented, joining me at the viewport. "Didn't feel like I had much choice," I replied. "There's always a choice, Evan. You chose to help them, then you chose to leave everything behind." He looked at me seriously. "Why?" I considered the question, watching as Earth became just another point of light among stars. "When I was with the Relief Corps, I had purpose. After Sarah died, I lost that. Just existed." I glanced across the cargo bay to where Sarah sat with Nira. These past few days helping them, I felt alive again. Marcus nodded, understanding in his eyes. "And now I see if I can build something new, something better." I smiled slightly. "Isn't that why anyone leaves home, to find something better?" "Some do," he agreed. "Others run away." "I'm not running," I said with sudden certainty. "For the first time in years, I'm running towards something." The ship lurched again as the FTL drives engaged. Through the viewport, the stars blurred and stretched, Earth vanishing completely as we entered faster-than-light travel. A new phase of the journey had begun, not just across space, but into an uncertain future I had chosen for myself. As I watched Sierra gently tending to Neri, I felt a sense of purpose settling into my bones, replacing the hollow emptiness that had defined me for too long. Whatever waited for us on Proxima B, we would face it together. 6 months later, I stood on the banks of what the colonists called the Serpentine River, watching the twin suns of Proxima Centauri sink toward the horizon. The taller sun cast a deep orange glow across the landscape, while its smaller companion burned a fierce blue, creating a perpetual purple twilight that never quite reached full darkness. The settlement had grown in the months since our arrival. New modular structures rising along the river valley, greenhouse domes filled with experimental crops from both Earth and Valar. Humans and Valeri worked side by side, their past conflicts set aside in the face of shared challenges and limited resources. It wasn't paradise. The atmosphere required filtration masks for extended outdoor activity. Water had to be processed to remove trace elements toxic to both species. Occasional storms from the unstable magnetic fields swept through the valley, forcing everyone into shelters. But it was home now, my home. "Thought I'd find you here," Marcus said, approaching from the path that led back to the settlement. His limp had improved, though it would likely never fully heal. "Always watching the sunset." I smiled, not taking my eyes off the horizon. "Never gets old. Son. We don't have anything like this on Earth." "True enough." He settled beside me on a flat rock, wincing slightly as he adjusted his position. Supply ship made it through the blockade, brought news from Earth. I nodded, unsurprised. The political situation had continued to deteriorate after our departure. The Enforcement Division had tightened control over the remaining refugee populations, and sympathizers were being systematically identified and detained. "How bad?" I asked. "Worse in some ways, better in others. Underground resistance is growing. More people asking questions." Marcus picked up a stone and tossed it into the gently flowing river. "Your apartment was searched, by the way. They know you helped Syrah escape." I'd expected as much. "So no going back?" "Not anytime soon," he confirmed. "But things change. Governments fall. Policies shift." He gave me a sidelong glance. "Besides, would you want to go back?" Before I could answer, a familiar voice called from further up the path. I turned to see Neri running toward us, her small form silhouetted against the purple sky. At 18 months, she had grown remarkably, now able to walk and even run with the boundless energy of a toddler. Behind her, Syrah followed at a more measured pace, a data tablet in her long fingers. Neri reached me in a rush of excited movement, throwing her small arms around my legs. Look." She held up a tiny object, a seedling in a small pot. I lifted her into my arm, examining her proud achievement. "That's amazing, Neri, your very first plant." The seedling was one of Syrah's experimental hybrids, Earth basil genetically modified to thrive in Proxima soil. "You'll be a great botanist like your mother." Neri beamed, her golden eyes bright with pride. Though not biologically mine, she had taken to calling me Da shortly after we settled on Proxima B. Neither Syrah nor I had corrected her. Some bonds transcended biology, transcended species. Syrah joined us, her expression softening as she observed our interaction. "She insisted on showing you immediately," she explained, "would not even wait until dinner." In the months since our escape, Syrah had taken on leadership of the settlement's agricultural projects, her expertise in xenobotany proving invaluable to the colony's survival. The formal guarded woman I'd first met had gradually revealed other sides of herself, brilliant, determined, occasionally even humorous. We had grown closer, navigating the complex territory between friendship and something more. Both cautious, both wounded by our pasts, but drawn together nonetheless. "I have to get back," Marcus said, rising with a knowing smile. "Council meeting about the new water reclamation system." He ruffled Neri's hair gently, a human gesture he'd adopted that delighted the child, before heading back toward the settlement. With Marcus gone, the three of us sat together on the riverbank, a small family forged in crisis and cemented by choice. Neri chattered excitedly about her seedling, mixing Valari and English in the natural bilingual flow of a child raised in two cultures. "The genetic modifications are taking hold better than expected," Syrah observed, showing me data on her tablet. "These hybrids may actually produce higher yields than either parent species." I smiled, seeing the scientist in her emerge. Earth plants and Valari techniques, best of both worlds. Yes, she agreed, looking out over the river. Like this place. Not perfect, but a new beginning. Neri climbed down from my lap to explore the riverbank, staying within our sight, but exercising her growing independence. We watched her in comfortable silence for a moment. Marcus brought news from Earth, I said finally. The apartment was searched. They know I helped you. Sierra's expression grew serious. Do you regret it, leaving everything behind? It was a question she had never directly asked before, though I'd seen it in her eyes sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking. The uncertainty about whether I resented the sacrifice, whether I blamed her for the loss of my world. I considered my answer carefully, watching Neri examine a colorful stone she'd found. I didn't leave much behind, I said honestly. A half-empty apartment, memories I was trying to escape. I turned to face Sierra directly. What I found here is worth more than what I lost. Something shifted in her golden eyes, relief perhaps, or understanding. When my mate died in the bombing, she said quietly, I believed I would never find connection again. That Nairi and I would always be alone, surviving, but not living. She reached out her long fingers, hesitantly touching mine. I was wrong. Her touch sent warmth through me that had nothing to do with the twin suns overhead. We had both lost so much worlds to family certainty. Yet somehow, improbably, we had found each other across the vast emptiness of space and prejudice. I've been meaning to ask you something, I said, taking a small object from my pocket, a carved wooden token I'd been working on in the evenings. It bore a simple design, Earth and Valar symbols intertwined. In the settlement records, Neri is registered as your child. I was thinking, maybe she could be registered as mine too, officially. Sierra took the token, examining it with careful fingers. In Valari culture, such carved symbols represented bonds, commitments, family ties. You wish to be her parent, in truth, not just in name, she said, understanding immediately. Yes, I confirmed. If you're willing. Her eyes met mine, searching. And us? What of us, Evan Reyes? The question that I'd been avoiding, not out of reluctance, but out of respect for her own healing process. That's your decision, I said carefully. I know what I feel, but I would never presume. Always so careful, she interrupted, a rare smile touching her lips. Even now. She moved closer, her free hand coming to rest lightly against my cheek. Valari bonding is not like human marriage. It is simpler in some ways, more complex in others. It begins with acknowledgement of what already exists. My heart raced as I understood her meaning. And what exists between us? Trust, she said simply. Born in danger, tested in flight, proven in building a new life. Trust is the foundation of Valari bonding. Her hand moved from my cheek to my chest, resting over my heart. The rest grows from there in its own time. Before I could respond, Neri came running back, full of excitement about her discoveries. The moment shifted, but didn't end. Something had been acknowledged, a door opened that would not close again. As evening deepened around us, we walked back to the settlement together. Nairi between us, sometimes holding my hand, sometimes Sierra's. Other colonists nodded greetings as we passed, human and Valari alike. Many had similar stories, escapes, losses, new beginnings. Our dwelling was small but comfortable, a hybrid of human and Valari design elements. Inside, Neri proudly placed her seedling on the windowsill where it would catch the morning light. Sierra prepared a simple meal while I set the table, moving around each other in the easy rhythm we'd developed over months of shared living. Later, after Neri had been tucked into bed with stories from two worlds, Sierra and I stood on the small balcony, looking out at the settlement lights twinkling against the perpetual purple twilight. 6 months ago, I opened my door to strangers, I said quietly. Best decision I ever made. Sierra's hand found mine, her fingers intertwining with my own. Another gesture she had adopted from humans, one that felt both alien and right. In my language, there is a saying, she replied. The stars may separate worlds, but they cannot separate hearts that have found each other. She turned to face me, her golden eyes reflecting the distant suns. We have traveled far, Evan Reyes, and we've got further to go. I added, thinking of all the challenges still facing the settlement, the uncertain future of this fragile colony. Yes, she agreed, but not alone. As the twin suns completed their descent, leaving only their perpetual glow on the horizon, I felt a sense of peace I had thought lost forever. Here on this distant world, I had found not just purpose, but belonging. Not just survival, but life. Whatever came next, whatever trials or joys awaited us, We would face them together, a family forged across stars, bound not by blood, but by choice, by trust, by love. The universe was vast and often cruel, but sometimes against all odds, it brought together exactly the souls who needed each other most. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that story. If you did, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to hear more tales from across the universe. I post new stories every week, and your support means everything. Drop a comment letting me know what you thought. I love hearing your reactions and theories. Until next time, keep looking up at the stars. You never know what might be looking back.